Billionaire woman discovers her long-lost daughter working as a waitress through a pendant. What if the person you've been searching for all your life is right in front of you, but you don't even recognize them? When Eleanor, a billionaire, steps into a restaurant, she sees a waitress wearing a pendant that brings everything crashing back. Could this young woman really be her long-lost daughter? The truth is closer than she ever imagined, but the reunion holds a twist that could change everything. Eleanor Westbrook had everything most people would dream of: an empire that stretched across continents, an unmatched reputation in the tech world, and wealth that seemed limitless. Her name was a beacon in the business world, and her success was envied by many. Yet, despite all of her achievements, Eleanor felt a constant ache deep inside her, a loneliness that couldn't be filled with money or power. She had once been a mother, but that was before the separation, before the heartbreaking decisions that led her to lose her daughter, Sophie. The memory of that day was still raw in Eleanor's mind. Her daughter had been just a baby when they were torn apart. She remembered holding Sophie in her arms, whispering sweet promises that she would always be there, no matter what. But circumstances beyond her control had stolen that precious moment, and Eleanor had never forgiven herself. For years, Eleanor had searched for her daughter. She had used her resources, hired private investigators, and followed every lead. But the trail had gone cold, and the more time passed, the more she felt like a failure. She had built an empire, yes, but it was an empire with a hole in the center. A hole no amount of success could fill. In her darkest moments, Eleanor would look at the empty room where her daughter's crib had once been. It felt like a lifetime ago, and yet the pain was still fresh. She tried to push it aside, focusing on her work, but Sophie's absence was a constant reminder that she was missing something far more important than all her achievements. As Eleanor sat in her lavish office, looking out over the city skyline, the weight of her losses seemed heavier than ever. She had it all except for the one thing that truly mattered, the one person who would have made everything complete. One day, Eleanor decided to take a break from the frenzy of her business meetings and dine at the Crescent Table, a quiet restaurant that she frequented when she wanted to escape the pressures of her world. It was a simple, elegant place, nothing like the grandiose events or gala dinners she often attended. She found solace in its understated beauty and the warm atmosphere. The restaurant was a popular choice for many in her circle, but for Eleanor, it was a refuge from the constant demands of her empire. It was late in the afternoon, and the restaurant was less crowded than usual. Eleanor sat alone at a table near the window, sipping her wine. As she scanned through some reports on her tablet, the peaceful ambience of the place seemed to calm her mind, something she rarely found in her bustling life. As she sat there, she couldn't help but notice a young waitress moving gracefully through the restaurant, carrying a tray of drinks. Her movements were fluid, confident, and she seemed to have a quiet energy about her that caught Eleanor's attention. The waitress was young, probably in her 20s, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. There was something about her that seemed oddly familiar. Eleanor couldn't put her finger on it, but something about her presence felt like a connection, a fleeting moment where time seemed to stop. The waitress came to Eleanor's table to clear her plate. As she leaned over to collect the dishes, Eleanor's eyes were drawn to a pendant around the waitress's neck. It was small, silver, and delicate, a simple locket. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced, and, for a moment, everything else in the room seemed to fade away. She knew that pendant. She had given it to Sophie when she was just a baby. The moment Eleanor saw the pendant, something inside her snapped into focus. She could hardly breathe as she stared at the locket. It was the same one she had given Sophie years ago, a small, silver locket with intricate engravings, a symbol of their bond. It was meant to be a promise, a connection between them, no matter where life took them. Eleanor had held onto the memory of that pendant for years, and now, to see it in the hands of this young woman was beyond anything she had imagined. Could it really be? Was this the sign she had been waiting for? Without thinking, Eleanor stood up from her seat, her heart pounding in her chest. The waitress paused, startled by Eleanor's sudden movement. "Excuse me," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where did you get that pendant?" The waitress looked confused for a moment, glancing down at the pendant, then back And Eleanor, "Oh, it's something my grandmother gave me when I started working here. She said it was an heirloom." Eleanor felt a wave of emotions wash over her: disbelief, hope, confusion, and a deep yearning that had been buried for so long. The pendant, it had to mean something. The universe couldn't be that cruel, could it? Could this waitress really be her daughter? Her hands shook as she reached into her purse and pulled out the only photograph she had of Sophie, the one she had kept hidden away for all these years. It was the last photo of her daughter, taken when Sophie was just an infant. Before they were separated, Eleanor placed the photograph gently on the table, looking at the waitress, who now stood frozen, her expression changing as she glanced at the picture. "This is my daughter," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. Do you recognize her?" The waitress's face turned pale as she stared at the photograph. She looked between the picture and Eleanor's face. Her eyes widened in disbelief. I don't know what to say." Eleanor felt a lump form in her throat. She knew this was crazy, but the connection was undeniable. The pendant, the resemblance, the feeling in her heart, it all pointed to one possibility. Eleanor stood there, staring at the waitress, her heart racing. She had searched for years, and now, in the most unlikely of places, the answer seemed to have appeared. "I've been looking for you," Eleanor whispered, barely able to keep her emotions in check. "I've searched for you all these years. I'm your mother." The waitress blinked, struggling to process what Eleanor had just said. She shook her head slowly, confusion and disbelief written all over her face. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "How can you be my mother? I don't remember you." Eleanor gently placed her hand on the waitress's arm, her voice soft yet firm. "I lost you when you were just a baby, but I never stopped looking for you. That pendant, that locket, I gave it to you when you were born. It was a symbol, a way to remember me, no matter where you were." The waitress's eyes filled with tears as the truth began to sink in. For the first time in her life, she felt like a piece of the puzzle had finally clicked into place. The years of uncertainty, the longing, and the feeling of being lost there all made sense now. "I'm so sorry," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to lose you. I never wanted to be apart from you." The young woman looked down at the pendant again, then at the photo, her heart racing. She wasn't sure how to feel. She had always felt a void in her life, but now she had found the one thing that could fill it: a mother, a family. As the young woman stood there, still trying to process the revelation, Eleanor gently placed her hand on her shoulder, offering comfort and warmth. "I know this is a lot to take in," Eleanor said softly, "but I need you to know something. I've spent my life searching for you, and now that I've found you, I'll never let you go again." The waitress, now known to Eleanor as Sophie, looked up at her, the initial shock still lingering in her eyes. Slowly, she nodded. "I don't know if I can understand everything right now, but I want to try. I've spent my whole life not knowing who I was, and now I have answers." Eleanor smiled, her eyes welling with tears of relief. "We'll take it one step at a time. We have a lifetime to make up for." For the first time in years, Eleanor felt whole. She had found her daughter, and together, they would begin the journey of healing the wounds of the past. The tension in the room was palpable as Eleanor and Sophie sat across from each other in the quiet corner of the restaurant. The weight of years lost to separation hung in the air like an unspoken truth, a heavy cloud that neither of them knew how to disperse. Sophie had never anticipated meeting her biological mother this way, through a random encounter, a pendant, and a flood of emotions that seemed impossible to navigate all at once. Sophie's hands rested nervously in her lap, her fingers twining around a napkin, as her eyes darted between her mother's face and the table between them. Eleanor, on the other hand, sat with an air of quiet dignity, though her eyes betrayed the deep hurt she had carried for years. "How do you feel?" Eleanor asked, her voice calm but laced with concern. Sophie met her gaze briefly before looking away. She didn't know how to put her feelings into words. Everything had shifted so quickly. In the span of just a few hours, her entire world had been turned upside down. The woman sitting across from her, the one she had never known, had just revealed herself to be the very person Sophie had been searching for all her life. "I don't know what to feel," Sophie replied, her voice trembling slightly. "You're my mom, but this feels like a dream. How am I supposed to process something like this? I've spent years wondering why you weren't there, and now, you're here, sitting across from me." Eleanor's heart ached as she heard Sophie's voice break. It was a raw, honest confession, one that carried the weight of years of hurt. The silence between them felt like a barrier, thick with emotions that neither of them knew how to voice. Eleanor leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped on the table. "I understand. I know this must feel overwhelming. But Sophie, I want you to know that I've spent years thinking about you. I've always wished I could have been there for you. I thought about you every single day." Sophie's eyes met Eleanor's again, her gaze intense. "You really spent all this time looking for me?" Eleanor nodded, her voice shaking slightly. "Yes, I never stopped searching for you. Not a single day went by without me wondering where you were, if you were okay. I've regretted not being there for you every single day of my life. I'm so sorry." Sophie blinked back tears as she processed the depth of her mother's words. For so long, she had believed that Eleanor didn't care, that she had abandoned her. To hear Eleanor admit that she had spent years searching, longing for a reunion, it shifted something deep within Sophie's heart. But even with that new knowledge, she struggled to bridge the gap between the woman before her and the mother she had longed for. "I don't know how to trust all of this," Sophie said quietly. "All these years, I was told stories that painted you as someone who didn't want me, who just left. And now, all of a sudden, you're here, saying you never gave up." Eleanor's chest tightened at the rawness of Sophie's pain. She wanted to reach out, to hold her, but she knew better than to force something that wasn't ready. "I know, Sophie. I know how you must feel, and I'm so sorry. The past, it was complicated, but that doesn't excuse what happened. I should have fought harder. I should have never let anyone stop me from being there for you." Sophie let out a shaky breath and leaned back in her chair. She was caught in a storm of emotions: relief, anger, confusion, hope. Her life had been a series of questions without answers, and now, in the span of one conversation, those questions were flooding her heart. The woman sitting before her was not the stranger she had imagined. She was real, flawed, sincere, and filled with the same deep longing that Sophie had always carried. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The restaurant buzzed around them, but it felt as though they were in a bubble of their own. Sophie's heart was heavy, but for the first time, it didn't feel quite as empty as it had before. The evening unfolded slowly, each word exchanged between them more meaningful than the last. Sophie told Eleanor about her life, the family that raised her, the pain of growing up without answers, the feeling of never quite fitting into the world she was placed in. She spoke of her adoptive parents, the well-meaning couple who had given her a home, but had kept the truth of her birth from her. "I didn't have the easiest childhood," Sophie admitted, her voice soft but steady. "They loved me, but there was always this missing piece, this feeling that there was more to my story than what I knew. I felt it every day, like something was just out of reach." Eleanor listened intently, her heart aching for the daughter she never knew. She hadn't realized just how deeply the absence of the truth had hurt Sophie. "I'm sorry," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. "You deserved so much more. You deserved to know the truth. I failed you in that, and I'll never be able to make up for the years we've lost." Sophie paused, then looked Eleanor in the eyes. "But you didn't give up," she said quietly. "That means something. You never gave up on me." The words struck Eleanor deep, and for a moment, all she could do was nod. She had spent years trying to find a way back to Sophie, and in that moment, it felt like all that searching wasn't in vain. But even as they connected, there was a part of Sophie that couldn't fully let go of the past. The wounds of abandonment ran deep, and while she could see the love in Eleanor's eyes, she wasn't sure she was ready to trust it. The days that followed were filled with cautious steps forward. Eleanor and Sophie spent more time together, talking about the things they had missed. Eleanor shared the story of her career, the empire she had built, and the sacrifices she had made. Sophie shared her own struggles, her life as a woman who had always been searching for something she couldn't quite define. As they talked, Sophie began to see her mother in a different light. Eleanor wasn't just a powerful businesswoman. She was a mother who had loved her daughter from afar and had done everything in her power to find her. Sophie had never known this side of her, and it was slowly changing her perspective. Still, the past couldn't be erased. And Sophie wasn't sure how to reconcile the two versions of her life, one filled with pain and loss, and the other with hope and newfound love. "I don't know if I can just forget all the years I spent without you," Sophie said one evening, her voice quiet. "I don't know if I can trust that everything's going to be okay." Eleanor reached across the table and gently took Sophie's hand. "You don't have to forget the past. We just need to learn to move forward together, step by step." Sophie squeezed her hand, her heart swelling with a mixture of hope and fear. "I'm willing to try." As the weeks passed, their bond continued to grow. Slowly but surely, they began to build the relationship that had been stolen from them. For so long, Eleanor was patient, giving Sophie the space she needed while also proving to her that she could be trusted. One day, Eleanor decided it was time for them to take a trip together. She wanted to show Sophie the world she had built, not as a businesswoman, but as a mother who wanted to share her life with the daughter she had never stopped thinking about. As they stood together, looking out over the city from one of the high-rise windows in Eleanor's office, Sophie turned to her with a soft smile. "This is all so different from what I expected, but I think I'm ready to be part of your life, ready to be your daughter." Eleanor smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, Sophie. I promise I'll never let you go again." For Sophie and Eleanor, the future was no longer uncertain. Together, they had begun to rebuild what had been lost. The journey wasn't easy, but it was worth it. They had found each other, and in doing so, they had found the strength to move forward together. Eleanor knew that the years they had lost could never be regained, but with Sophie by her side, she had everything she needed to move forward. Together, they would create a future filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities.